Many people with complex trauma have a low-grade depression. There's just constantly a sadness that is there. So I think it's important to understand that I think complex trauma contributes to depression in a bunch of different ways. So we tend to think of depression, we kind of just put it in a general box. You're depressed. It must be a chemical imbalance in the brain. That could be true, but I think complex trauma helps us realize there's other factors that feed depression besides just chemical imbalance in the brain. So think first of all of a child, what we talked about at the beginning, where your emotions basically exist in a negative environment. You constantly are feeling pain you can't resolve. That pain is getting worse. Your needs aren't being met. You feel empty. You can't connect. There's all kinds of negative emotions that just grow. Then your circumstances, there's constant danger, there's constant stress. So your circumstances feed these negative emotions. So the negative of your life far outweighs the positives. That just takes its toll. That gradually grinds you into deeper and deeper depression. But there's something else. When a child is in complex trauma, they're constantly in danger or perceived danger. So they're in their sympathetic nervous system all the time. Their parasympathetic nervous system, whose purpose is to provide rest and healing and balance to your nervous system so that you don't burn out, isn't allowed to kick in. And so your go survival mode, energy mode, without the necessary rest and healing, over time you're heading towards burnout. What we realize is that sometimes depression kicks in as a way to try and get you out of your sympathetic nervous system into your parasympathetic nervous system. It's trying to protect you from totally burning out. Another thing is this. When you're stuffing emotions all the time, it's like trying to hold a beach ball under the water. It takes a lot of emotional energy to hold down anger, to hold down fear, to hold down all the guilt that you feel, to hold down all of the different emotions that you feel. You repress, and you just get exhausted emotionally, and that can result in depression. Dissociation is another element here that leads to depression. So trauma, if it's so severe, the brain's way of protecting is to retreat to an internal world, to dissociate from the present. And often what it's saying is my nervous system is overwhelmed from this trauma. I need a way to escape my nervous system. And depression becomes a way to help a person escape living within their nervous system that is overwhelmed. Then there's another thing. What happens with shame is I don't like myself. I hate myself. I'm angry at myself. I'm critical of myself. So anger turns inward. And anger turned inward can lead to depression. And then, sadly, for many people, depression has been their normal since they were little kids. Every day sucked. Every day they were in their sympathetic nervous system, and so depression became what was necessary to help them survive. It became their way of dissociating. They had anger turned inward. Depression was their normal state, and it becomes their default setting. Their brain begins to go, if I don't feel depressed, I feel like something's wrong. If I don't feel depressed, I feel bad. I need to feel depressed to feel normal. And so they develop systems in their thinking, they develop systems in their behavior to try to keep them feeling depressed. It's almost like they're addicted to needing to feel depressed to feel normal. Another element that feeds into this is one of the most important things to stabilize us, to give us the positive chemicals in the brain, is connection with safe people. True, healthy intimacy. If I don't have connection, I don't have those four chemicals, and then depression begins to settle in. One of the greatest healing elements of depression is beginning to connect with healthy, safe people again. And then there's one other thing that comes out of the shame thing, and it's shame lies that we tell ourselves. So nobody wants to connect with me. Anybody who gets to know me will reject me or abandon me. I only have value if I perform. My value comes from my external world. I have no inherent value. If I set boundaries, I am a bad person. I'm selfish. I'm unloving. If I take care of myself, I am selfish and unloving. In order for people to like me, I have to be perfect. I have to give up all my needs. I have to become smaller. If I fail, I am a failure. When you believe those lies, that leads to depression. So complex trauma just can feed depression in many different ways. There's one other one that's tricky. What comes out of complex trauma is a lot of grief. You have a lot of losses, not just things that you had that you lost, but you also have things that you should have had but never got. So you lost something that you should have had but never had. That's a very real loss. And so part of what happens is the child is constantly experiencing losses. And one of the elements or stages of grief is sadness, depression. This sucks. I should be sad. I should feel depressed. But some people get stuck there. Now, for most people, when they go through a loss, the sad stage, it can go on for weeks, for months, for even years. It's part of the limbic brain gradually coming to terms and accepting the reality of what has happened and being able to let go. But what I have found with people from complex trauma is that often they get stuck in the sadness stage. There's something in them because they've never fully connected with anybody that just has trouble letting go. There's something in them that feels guilty for moving on. There's something in them that just, it fits into their default setting of depression. And so to go on and enjoy life again feels wrong. So they get stuck in this sadness stage of grieving. And it just keeps the depression alive. It keeps them having a reason to justify staying in this depressed state. So it's so important to say that most people from complex trauma have dealt with depression, over 90%. And that means that most have had suicidal ideation at some time because life sucks. The brain thinks I've tried everything to escape this pain. I've tried everything to resolve this pain. There's no solution that I have been able to find. Therefore, it makes sense that the only solution left is to kill myself. To have suicidal ideation doesn't mean you're planning to act on it. It just means your brain is continuing to explore options to escape the pain. So don't beat yourself up about it. Recognize that it happens and continue to reach out for help. So one of the things that I've realized with many people from complex trauma is they've lived with mild depression as their normal, or depression, deeper depression as their normal, their default setting. And so they don't even think they're depressed because that's been their normal. That's how they think everybody is. And so it's important to begin to understand the signs of depression so that I can begin to identify whether I am depressed or not. So signs of depression. You feel like you're being sucked into this black hole, that there's just a darkness that is pulling at you. You begin to lose interest in things that usually you enjoy. You begin to lose motivation to do things, even the things that you enjoyed. Those are signs of depression, losing interest, losing motivation. When you do stuff that normally would have given you pleasure, it's not giving you pleasure anymore. So more and more of life becomes drudgery. More and more of life takes effort. You feel more and more robotic. You're going through the motions. Nothing is giving you pleasure. And then there's a growing feelings of worthlessness. I have nothing to offer. My life sucks. I'm not a happy person. Nobody wants to be with me. I feel I don't have the energy to perform anything. I just have this growing feeling of worthlessness. And then there's a growing feeling of helplessness. I can't get myself out of this. I just am growing and feeling overwhelmed more and more. I'm losing the ability to cope with anything. Those are growing inside of you. Then that leads to growing feelings of antisocial. I just want to flight. I want to avoid people. I resist social interaction. It just takes too much work. I'm not in a good headspace. It creates panic. So I just want to isolate all the time. Then there's a usually growing irritability. You just don't have the emotional reserves to handle problems, to handle change, to handle annoyances. Then you get more negative, more pessimistic. You just see the dark, the negative side of things. And then for people that can lead to change in weight, change in appetite, you don't want to eat at all or you want to eat all the time. Change in sleep patterns, you want to sleep all the time or you can't sleep. For some people, they begin to have physical pain on top of the emotional pain. Others, they begin to get tired. Overwhelming fatigue is constantly there. They have difficulty concentrating on anything, and it begins to affect their memory. So those are all characteristics of deepening depression. So if you have those, reach out for help. Learning to manage depression, learning to improve depression becomes such a vital part in recovery. There's a ton of tools to learn, but it is so important. But there is hope. The final one I want to cover today is wanting to hope, but being afraid to hope. This one is so important to understand. What happens to a child is they come into life, they have this need to be authentic, this need to have all their needs met. So they've got 12 basic needs. Their parents are supposed to meet those needs. Their parents, let's say, don't meet some of the needs. The child then has this basic hope. And the hope is, if I change, it must be my fault. If I change, if I do something differently, then my parents will meet my needs. So there's a little graph there where the child, their need isn't met. They go, if I change, then my need will get met, and they have hope. And then so they start to go down the change road with the hope road, and it might look like, oh, it's going to work, but then their need doesn't get met. So what has happened there are two dynamics. Their need is not met, that hurts. Their hope is dashed, and that hurts. So they have two sources of pain now. But children have this tremendous capacity to hope. So where their brain goes next is, oh, okay, if I just try this thing, then I'll get my need met. And they hope again. And away they go. And they pursue this new option with great hope. And then that option backfires, so their need doesn't get met, their hopes get dashed. But children have tremendous capacity to hope, so they come up with another option, and they have full hope that it's going to work. What we have seen is that a child would do that for year after year after year, continue to hope, continue to come up with new options. And then around 10 to 12, 13 years old, something in the brain goes, you know what? I'm getting tired of getting my hopes up and having them dashed. That hurts a lot. Nothing seems to be working. It's really feeling hopeless. It feels like there's not a solution. So I'm not going to get my hopes up again, because to have my hopes dashed actually hurts more than not having my needs met. So they stop hoping. And that's when many children go into drugs, alcohol, into very hardened maladaptive behaviors, because I'm not even going to try anymore. I'm just going to live for instant pleasure, however I can get it. So they come into recovery. And what is recovery based on? There's hope that you can heal. There's hope that you can get healthy. And they go, nope, not going to hope. But they want to hope. They desire to have a healthy life. They desire to heal. So initially, often you have to piggyback on somebody else's hope. And they go, you know what? I've been through this. I've gone through the steps. I've done the work, and it pays off. There is grounds for hope based on evidence. What you had as a child was a child trying to gain hope out of a solution that wasn't even viable. Because the problem wasn't you, the problem was the other person. What you have now is a viable solution. So hope is legitimate. That's scary for a child. And so what can happen for many people in recovery is they piggyback off somebody else's hope. They start to see their life improve. They get their health back. They get their job back. They start to get relationships back. They get their kids back, and positive things are happening there. And all of a sudden their hope starts to go from piggybacking off somebody else's to hope is starting to be born inside of them. And they go, do I get my hopes up that this is going to work? Because if I get my hopes up and then it doesn't work, my hopes are going to get dashed again, and that is so painful. And so what many people do in recovery, as soon as they start to hope again, is a system switches on in the brain that says, nope, hope is too dangerous. Let's sabotage all the good stuff happening in our life. Let's go back to pain and not hoping because it feels safer there. So this desire to hope, but afraid to hope, is a powerful subconscious system that works in people and can do so much damage in recovery. And so it's so important for people to realize in recovery that, okay, I'm starting to hope, but my hope is based on viable solutions. My hope has been proven by other people who've done this stuff. So I'm not going to give in to my limbic brain and go to sabotage. I am going to stay in my cortex and get past the fear of my hopes being dashed again and stick at this long enough for it to prove that it's working and that my hope is legitimate. That is such a critical piece for people in their recovery journey.